Sign the papers and get out of my house, he sneered, tossing a pen at her like she was nothing. For 5 years, Isabella had been the invisible wife, cleaning his messes, enduring his mother's insults, and wearing cheap clothes while he chased millions. Ethan thought he was discarding a useless housewife. He didn't know he was divorcing the hidden CEO of the very conglomerate he was desperate to partner with. When the truth finally comes out in a boardroom full of sharks, the look on his face is worth billions. You don't want to miss a second of this karma. The expansive dining room of the Sterling estate was cold, despite the fireplace crackling in the corner. It was the kind of cold that seeped into your bones, born not of temperature, but of the people sitting around the mahogany table. Isabella sat at the far end, her hands folded quietly in her lap. She wore a simple navy dress she had bought at a department store 3 years ago. It was clean, pressed and modest, but against the backdrop of the Sterling family's ostentatious wealth, it looked like a rag. "Isabella, must you slouch?" Catherine Sterling's voice sliced through the silence like a serrated knife. The matriarch of the family took a sip of her Chardonnay, her eyes narrowing as she inspected her daughter-in-law. "We are celebrating Ethan's promotion to Vice President of Sales. Try to look less like the help." Ethan, seated at the head of the table, didn't even look up from his phone. He was typing furiously, likely communicating with his team, or so he claimed. He was a handsome man, with a sharp jawline and the kind of polished charm that worked well in boardrooms. But at home, that charm curdled into indifference. "I'm sorry, Catherine," Isabella said softly, straightening her spine. "I just wanted to say how proud I am of Ethan. 5 years of hard work." "5 years of his hard work," Catherine interrupted, setting her glass down with a sharp clink. "And 5 years of you doing what exactly? Potting plants, reading paperback novels? Honestly, Ethan, I don't know how you tolerate coming home to such stagnation. A man of your caliber needs a power couple dynamic. Look at the Vanderbilts. Look at the Rothschilds." Isabella bit her lip. They didn't know. They couldn't know. To them, she was just Isabella, the orphan girl Ethan had met in a coffee shop before his career took off. They saw her silence as weakness. They didn't know that the phone vibrating in her pocket contained urgent emails from the board of directors of Helios International, a multi-billion-dollar private equity firm that silently owned half the luxury real estate in Manhattan. Isabella was the majority shareholder. She was the ghost CEO the financial world speculated about in the Wall Street Journal. She had kept it secret to ensure Ethan loved her for her, not her portfolio. "Mum, leave her alone," Ethan said, though his tone was bored, not defensive. He finally put his phone down. "She tries. Not everyone has ambition." The backhanded defense stung worse than the insult. "I have ambition, Ethan," Isabella said, her voice steady. "I manage the house. I support you. You manage a household with 3 maids," Ethan scoffed, letting out a cruel chuckle. "Let's be real, Bella. You're a passenger in this life. I'm the pilot. And right now, the pilot is stressed because the merger with the Helios Group is stalling." Isabella's heart skipped a beat. Helios, her company. Ethan had been trying to secure a partnership with one of her subsidiaries for months. He had been rejected 3 times because his proposals were arrogant and lacked substance. She had personally red-flagged his file, anonymously, of course. "Maybe the Helios Group wants to see more integrity in the proposal," Isabella suggested carefully. "Maybe they care about the ethics of the supply chain." The table went silent. Catherine burst out laughing, a harsh, cawing sound. "Oh, listen to her!" Catherine wiped a tear from her eye. "The housewife is giving corporate advice. Ethan, darling, did you hear? She thinks she knows what a multinational conglomerate wants. Ethan shook his head, looking at Isabella with pure pity. Stick to the grocery list, Bella. Business is for the adults. The dinner continued, a parade of humiliations. Isabella endured it, as she always did, holding on to the hope that the sweet, humble man she had married was still in there somewhere, buried under the weight of his mother's expectations and corporate greed. But as dessert was served, a pear tart Isabella had baked herself, which Catherine refused to touch, Ethan cleared his throat. "I have an announcement," he said, checking his Rolex. "And it's not just about the promotion." Isabella looked up, a flicker of hope in her chest. Maybe he was going to suggest a vacation, a chance to reconnect. "I've met someone who can help me with the Helios deal," Ethan said, his eyes finally locking on to Isabella's, but there was no warmth in them, only ice. "Her name is Jessica Vane. Her father is on the board of a major bank. She's connected. She gets me, Bella. She speaks my language." Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. "What are you saying, Ethan?" "I'm saying that I've outgrown you," he stated flatly. "I need a wife who fits the future I'm building, not a relic from my past." Catherine clapped her hands together, delighted. "Finally. I told you, Ethan. I told you years ago." "I want a divorce, Bella," Ethan said, pulling a thick envelope from inside his blazer and sliding it across the polished wood. It stopped right next to the untouched pear tart. "And I want you out of the house by tomorrow morning." Isabella stared at the envelope. The white paper seemed to glow under the chandelier's crystal teardrops. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the sound of Catherine humming a satisfied tune as she finally took a bite of the tart. "You're kicking me out?" Isabella asked, her voice barely a whisper. "After everything. I supported you when you were an intern, Ethan. I paid our rent when you couldn't." "That was a long time ago," Ethan dismissed, waving his hand as if swatting away a fly. "I paid you back for that rent 10 times over with the jewelry and the car. We're square." "Square?" Isabella stood up. Her legs felt shaky, but a cold fire was starting to ignite in her stomach. "Marriage isn't a transaction, Ethan. Everything is a transaction," he countered. "Sign the papers. I'm being generous. I'm giving you the apartment in Queens and a lump sum of $50,000. That's more than enough for someone with your limited skill set." 50,000. It was an insult. It was less than what Isabella made in interest every hour. "And if I don't sign?" she asked. Ethan's face darkened. "Then my lawyers will destroy you. They'll paint you as a gold digger. They'll drag this out until you don't have a dime left to buy a coffee. Jessica has already introduced me to her family's legal team at Sterling and Cooper. You can't win." Jessica. The name hung in the air like a foul odor. "Is she here?" Isabella asked, her intuition flaring. "She's waiting in the car," Ethan admitted, without a shred of shame. "We have a gala to attend, a real networking event, something you wouldn't understand." Isabella looked at Catherine, who was now ignoring her entirely, scrolling through her iPad, looking for vacation homes in the Hamptons. She looked at Ethan, the man she had loved, now twisted into a caricature of corporate greed. The sadness that had weighed her down for years suddenly evaporated. It was replaced by something sharper. Clarity. She reached out and took the envelope. "I'll read them," Isabella said. "But I have conditions." "You're in no position to make demands," Ethan sneered. "I want the meeting to finalize the divorce to happen at a neutral location," Isabella said firmly. "Next Friday, 10 a.m. "Fine," Ethan sighed, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "My lawyer's office. Don't be late." "No," Isabella cut in. Not your lawyer's office. I want to meet at the Helios International headquarters, in the executive conference room on the 40th floor. Ethan froze. He blinked, confused. Helios? How? Why would we meet there? You can't just walk into Helios. I have a friend who works in HR, Isabella lied smoothly. She booked a room for me so I could have legal counsel present without paying for an office. It's the only way I'll sign. Ethan laughed, a barking sound of disbelief. You? You have a connection at Helios? Probably a janitor. He smirked at his mother. Fine. If you want to be humiliated in the lobby of the biggest company in the city, be my guest. Maybe seeing real success up close will show you exactly what you're losing. Maybe, Isabella said, clutching the envelope. Ethan turned to leave, not even offering a goodbye. He walked out the front door, and moments later, Isabella heard the roar of his Aston Martin engine. Through the window, she saw a blonde woman in a red dress, Jessica, waiting in the passenger seat. She looked like a shark in silk. Isabella waited until the tail lights disappeared. Then she turned to Catherine. I'm leaving now, Catherine. Good riddance, the older woman mumbled. Leave the keys on the table and don't take the silverware. Isabella walked out into the cool night air. She didn't go to her old Honda Civic. Instead, she walked down the long driveway to the main road, where a sleek, black Rolls-Royce Phantom was idling in the shadows, its lights off. The back door opened before she even reached it. A man in a sharp suit stepped out. Sebastian, her personal assistant and head of security. Good evening, Madam President, Sebastian said, his British accent crisp and respectful. Rough dinner? The marriage is over, Sebastian, Isabella said, sliding into the plush leather interior. The car smelled of expensive leather and faint jasmine. Initiate Protocol Omega. Sebastian's eyes widened slightly in the rearview mirror. Omega? That involves full asset liquidation of associated parties and a hostile takeover. Are you sure? Isabella pulled out her phone. She opened the dossier on Ethan's company, and specifically, the profile of the Vane family Jessica belonged to. They wanted a transaction, Isabella whispered, her eyes hardening as she looked back at the Sterling mansion one last time. I'm going to give them the most expensive transaction of their lives. Call the board. Tell them I'm coming in tomorrow. And tell them to prepare the acquisition papers for Ethan's company. I want to own the building he walks into every morning. Very good, ma'am, Sebastian said. Where to? The penthouse, Isabella said, leaning back and closing her eyes. I have a divorce to plan. The elevator to the penthouse of the Millennium Tower didn't just move, it ascended with a silent, heavy authority, much like its owner. When the doors slid open, Isabella didn't step out into a hallway. She stepped into a command center. Gone was the slouching, apologetic housewife. In her place stood Isabella Bella Rossi, the founder of Helios International, a woman whose net worth was a closely guarded secret, estimated in the 11 figures. Welcome back, Miss Rossi, a team of 4 assistants chorused as she walked down the marble corridor. They didn't look at her cheap department store dress. They knew better. They looked at the fire in her eyes. Sebastian, get me a change of clothes. Saint Laurent, the black power suit. And get the legal team in the war room in 10 minutes, Isabella ordered, her voice projecting with a clarity she hadn't used in years. I want Arthur there, and get me the financials on Apex Solutions, Ethan's company. 20 minutes later, Isabella looked like a different person. The navy dress was in the trash. She wore a tailored black suit that cost more than Ethan's car. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun, and on her wrist sat a Patek Philippe watch. She walked into the glass-walled conference room, where Arthur Pendleton, the most feared corporate lawyer in New York, was waiting. Arthur stood up immediately. He was a man who had sued governments and won, but he had a healthy fear of Isabella. "Isabella," Arthur nodded. "I received the text about Protocol Omega. Are we really doing this? It's aggressive, even for you." "He kicked me out, Arthur," Isabella said, taking the seat at the head of the table. "He threw me away like garbage so he could merge with the Vane family. He thinks I'm destitute. He offered me $50,000. Arthur winced. "Ouch. That's not even your weekly charity budget." "Exactly." Isabella opened a dossier on the table. "Ethan is the VP of sales at Apex Solutions. Apex has been trying to get a contract with Helios for 6 months. Why haven't we signed?" "Because their financials are shaky," Arthur explained, tapping his tablet. "They're over-leveraged. And frankly, Ethan's proposals are amateur. He relies on buzzwords rather than logistics. If we signed with them, we'd lose money." "Perfect." Isabella smiled, a cold, predatory expression. "Approve the meeting." Arthur blinked. "Excuse me?" "Send an official invite to Ethan Sterling and the CEO of Apex. Tell them Helios is ready to sign the exclusivity deal. Invite them to the executive conference room on Friday at 10:06 a.m. "But that's when your divorce settlement is scheduled," Arthur pointed out. "I know," Isabella said, swiveling her chair to look out at the Manhattan skyline. "Ethan thinks he's meeting his wife in a borrowed room to sign divorce papers, and then he thinks he's going to meet the CEO of Helios to sign the deal of a lifetime. He doesn't realize they are the same meeting." "He'll bring Jessica," Arthur warned. "The Vanes are vultures. Jessica has been pushing for this merger so her father's bank can refinance Apex's debt." "Good," Isabella said. "Bring them all. I want the Vanes there. I want the Apex CEO there. I want an audience." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "Dig into the Vane family trust. Jessica's father, Richard Vane. I remember a rumor about him and an offshore account in the Caymans regarding a construction project in 2018. Find the dirt, Arthur. If they want to play dirty, let's bury them." "Consider it done," Arthur said, typing furiously. "And the divorce papers?" "Draft a new version," Isabella said. "He wanted a clean break. I'll give him a clean break. But I'm keeping the assets he doesn't know I have. And I'm taking the one thing he actually cares about." "His car?" "No," Isabella whispered. "His reputation." The next 3 days were a blur of arrogant celebration for Ethan Sterling. He sat in his corner office at Apex Solutions, feet up on the desk, spinning a fountain pen between his fingers. The call had come through yesterday. Helios International wanted to sign. The elusive trillion-dollar giant had finally capitulated. "I told you I could do it," Ethan bragged into his phone. "Isabella was holding me back. Bad energy, Mum. Just bad energy. Since I kicked her out, everything is coming up roses." On the other end of the line, Catherine was ecstatic. "I knew it. That girl was a curse. Have you heard from her?" "Not a peep," Ethan laughed. "She's probably crying in a motel somewhere. She insisted on meeting at Helios HQ on Friday for the divorce papers, trying to act important. It's pathetic, really." "Just get it signed, Ethan. Then you and Jessica can be the power couple of the city." The door to his office swung open, and Jessica Vane walked in. She looked immaculate in a red designer dress, but her expression was tight. "Get off the phone, Ethan," she snapped. Ethan hung up on his mother without a second thought. "What's wrong, babe? We won. Helios called. We're meeting the CEO on Friday." "I know," Jessica said, pacing the room. "But my dad is worried. He says Helios never signs this fast. Usually, there's months of due diligence. He thinks it's a trap." "A trap?" Ethan scoffed, standing up and wrapping his arms around her rigid waist. "Jess, Look at me. I'm charming. I'm good at sales. I finally got through to them. Stop worrying. Your dad is just old school." "Maybe," Jessica murmured, pulling away. "But he's coming to the meeting, and the COO of Apex, Mr. Henderson, is coming too. This is a multi-million-dollar contract, Ethan. If you mess this up—" "I won't," Ethan promised. "Friday is going to be the best day of my life. 10:00 a.m., I sign the divorce papers with the mouse. 10:30 a.m., I sign the merger with the lion. Out with the old, in with the gold." The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sterling, a courier is here for you." "Send him in." A young man walked in and handed Ethan a large, heavy box wrapped in black velvet. There was no card, only the Helios insignia embossed in gold foil on the top. Ethan's eyes widened. "See? They're already sending gifts." He tore open the box. Inside lay a bottle of vintage wine, a 1945 Romane Conti. It was worth more than his house. "My God!" Jessica breathed, her skepticism vanishing. That's a fortune in a bottle." Under the bottle was a note, typed on heavy cream stationery. "To new beginnings. See you on Friday. The chairman." "The chairman," Ethan read aloud, a shiver of excitement running down his spine. "They love me, Jess. They absolutely love me." He didn't notice the subtle irony in the note. He didn't know that the new beginning referred to his destruction. And he certainly didn't know that the wine was the same vintage Isabella had bought for their first anniversary, a bottle he had refused to drink because he claimed red wine gave him a headache. She had saved it for a special occasion. This was it. Thursday night arrived, and Ethan was at a rooftop bar with his friends, toasting to his future. "To the single life," his friend Mark shouted, "and to the billions." Ethan clinked his glass, feeling on top of the world. He checked his phone. No messages from Isabella. She was probably too ashamed to reach out. He imagined her walking into the Helios lobby tomorrow, wearing her ragged clothes, terrified of the security guards. He would sign the papers, hand her the check, and then watch the security escort her out while he took the elevator to the top. It was going to be poetic. Meanwhile, across the city, Isabella sat in the dark of her penthouse, watching the city lights. Sebastian entered quietly. "The cameras are set up in the conference room, madam," Sebastian reported, "and Mr. Henderson of Apex has confirmed attendance. Richard Vane has also confirmed." "And the press?" Isabella asked. "Bloomberg and the Financial Times have been tipped off that a major acquisition is happening at Helios tomorrow. They will be waiting in the lobby for a statement at 11:00 a.m. Isabella turned her chair around. Her face was calm, stripped of all emotion. "Perfect," she said. "Make sure the reception desk knows to treat Mr. Sterling with the utmost condescension until the meeting starts. I want him frustrated before he even steps into the elevator." "Understood. And your attire for tomorrow?" Isabella stood up. "The white suit, the one I wore when I rang the bell at the NYSE. It's time to show him what a real power dynamic looks like." She walked to the window, looking at the tiny cars moving below. Ethan was down there somewhere, celebrating. "Enjoy your last night of freedom, Ethan," she whispered to the glass. "Tomorrow, school is in session." Friday morning in Manhattan was crisp and bright, the kind of weather that made millionaires feel invincible. Ethan Sterling stepped out of his Uber Black in front of the Helios International Tower, adjusting his tie in the reflection of the glass doors. He wasn't alone. Beside him was Jessica Vane, looking runway-ready in a sharp charcoal dress, and her father, Richard Vane. Richard was a heavy-set man with silver hair and eyes that constantly scanned the room for weakness. Bringing up the rear was Mr. Henderson, the current CEO of Apex Solutions, who looked sweaty and nervous. "Stop fidgeting, Henderson," Richard snapped, as they walked toward the revolving doors. "You're about to be partners with the biggest equity firm on the East Coast. Act like you belong here." "It's just, Helios is known for eating companies alive, Richard," Henderson muttered, wiping his brow. "They don't usually invite mid-level firms like Apex for a merger unless they want something specific." "They want me," Ethan interjected smoothly, flashing his ID at the security turnstile. "The chairman sent me a bottle of Romane Conti yesterday. We're practically family." They approached the front desk. The receptionist, a young woman with glasses and a demeanor of absolute steel, didn't look up from her screen. "Name?" she asked, her voice bored. "Ethan Sterling," he announced, leaning on the marble counter. "And party. We're here for the 10 a.m. meeting with the CEO. And also, a private matter with a Ms. Isabella Sterling, if she's arrived." The receptionist finally looked up. Her eyes lingered on Ethan for a second too long, a strange mix of amusement and pity dancing in her pupils. "You are expected in the executive boardroom, 40th floor," she said, handing him a visitor pass. "Take the private elevator on the left. And good luck, Mr. Sterling." "See?" Ethan smirked at Jessica. "They know me." As they rode the silent high-speed elevator upward, the air pressure changed. "Ethan," Jessica whispered, checking her makeup in the mirrored wall. "Where is your wife meeting us? You said she'd be here." "She's probably cowering in the hallway," Ethan laughed. "I told her to meet me at the conference room. I figured I'd get the divorce signed in 5 minutes, kick her out, and then we pop the champagne with the Helios CEO. Richard Vane grunted. "Risky move, mixing domestic trash with high-level business. Don't let her make a scene." "She won't," Ethan assured him. "She's a mouse." The elevator doors pinged open. They stepped onto the 40th floor. It was a space of intimidating minimalism. The floors were black marble, the walls were glass, and the view of New York City was breathtaking. "Mr. Sterling." A tall man in a bespoke suit approached them. It was Sebastian. "Right this way." Sebastian led them down a long corridor to a set of double mahogany doors. He pushed them open. The boardroom was massive. A table long enough to seat 30 people dominated the room, but the room was empty, save for one person. Standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, with her back turned to them, was a woman. She was looking out at the skyline, her posture rigid. She wore a simple trench coat that covered her clothes. Ethan stopped in his tracks. He recognized the silhouette. "Isabella," he hissed. The woman turned around. It was her. Her face was pale, devoid of makeup, and she looked tired. "Hello, Ethan," she said softly. Ethan let out a breath of frustration, marching into the room. "What the hell are you doing in here? This is the executive boardroom. You were supposed to wait in the lobby until I called for you." The receptionist told me to come up," Isabella said, her voice trembling slightly. "God, you're embarrassing," Ethan groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. He turned to Richard and Henderson, who were watching with disdain. "Gentlemen, Jessica, I apologize. This is my soon-to-be ex-wife. She's a little confused about protocol." Jessica stepped forward, looking Isabella up and down with a sneer. "So this is the famous Bella. You really wore that old coat to a place like this? You look like you're here to clean the windows." "Just sign the papers, Bella," Ethan snapped, pulling the document from his briefcase and slamming it onto the polished table. "Right now. Sign them. Take your check. And get out before the CEO of Helios walks through those doors. If he sees you here, he'll have security throw you out. And I won't stop them." Isabella looked at the papers. Then she looked at the group of people staring at her, like she was an insect. "Is that really all you care about, Ethan?" she asked quietly. "The image?" "I care about my future," Ethan spat. "And you are not part of it. Sign." Isabella walked slowly to the table. She picked up the pen. Her hand hovered over the signature line. $50,000, she murmured. And the Queen's apartment? Take it or leave it, Richard Vane boomed, checking his watch. Hurry up, girl. We have real business to discuss. The chairman of Helios doesn't like to be kept waiting. Isabella smiled. It was a small, sad smile. You're right, Mr. Vane, she said. The chairman hates waiting. She signed the paper with a flourish. Done, Ethan exhaled, snatching the papers away. Finally. Now get out. The elevator is down the hall. Don't talk to anyone on your way out. Isabella didn't move. She stood at the head of the table, the seat reserved for the CEO. I said move, Ethan growled. No, Isabella said. Her voice changed. The tremble was gone. It was replaced by a tone of absolute command. Excuse me? Ethan blinked. Isabella reached up and undid the belt of her trench coat. She let the cheap fabric slide off her shoulders and pool onto the floor. Underneath, she wasn't wearing the rags of a housewife. She was wearing a blindingly white, custom-tailored power suit. On her lapel sat a diamond brooch in the shape of a sun, the Helios insignia. She sat down in the chair at the head of the table. She didn't look at Ethan. She looked at Sebastian, who had just entered the room with a stack of files. Sebastian, Isabella said, her voice ringing with authority, please escort Mr. Sterling to the guest seat and bring up the acquisition files for Apex Solutions. The room went dead silent. The silence was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. Ethan stared at her. His brain was misfiring, unable to process the visual information in front of him. Isabella, his quiet, mousy wife, was sitting in the CEO's chair of Helios International, wearing a suit that cost more than his annual salary. Isabella, get out of that chair, Ethan whispered, his voice cracking. This isn't a game. You're going to get us arrested. Sit down, Ethan, Richard Vane said. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was terrified. The older man's face had drained of all color. He was staring at the brooch on Isabella's lapel. He recognized it. Dad? Jessica asked, her voice shrill. What's going on? Why is she sitting there? Because, Isabella answered, locking eyes with Jessica. This is my building. This is my table. And you are breathing my air. Ethan felt his knees give out. He stumbled into the nearest chair. No, that's impossible. You bake tarts. You clip coupons. I also manage a $40 billion diversified portfolio, Isabella said coolly, opening the blue folder in front of her. I founded Helios International 7 years ago under my maiden name, Rossi. I kept it quiet because I wanted a life outside of the boardroom. I wanted a family. She looked at Ethan with cold indifference. I thought I had one with you, but it seems I made a bad investment. Mr. Henderson, the CEO of Apex, looked like he was about to vomit. Ms. Rossi? You are the chairman. I am, Isabella confirmed, and we have a lot to discuss. Wait! Ethan stood up, a desperate, manic grin forming on his face. Wait a minute. This is amazing. Bella, why didn't you tell me? My wife is the CEO of Helios. This is perfect. The merger. It's a done deal then. We're family. He reached out to grab her hand across the table. Isabella didn't flinch. She simply held up the divorce papers he had just made her sign. We aren't family, Ethan, she said. You just divorced me. 5 minutes ago. Remember? Sign it and get out. Ethan froze. The ink was barely dry. Bella, baby, that was just business strategy, he stammered. I didn't mean it. Tear them up. We can start over. I have no intention of starting over, Isabella said, handing the papers to Arthur, her lawyer, who had quietly entered the room. File these immediately, Arthur. The settlement is agreed upon. He gets the $50,000. I keep everything else." "Understood, Miss Rossi," Arthur said, taking the papers. "Now," Isabella turned her gaze to Richard Vane. "Mr. Vane, you are pushing for this merger between Apex and Helios because Apex is drowning in debt, and your bank, Vane Capital, holds that debt. If Apex goes under, your bank takes a massive hit. Is that correct?" Richard swallowed hard, loosening his tie. "Miss Rossi, business is complex." "It's not complex," Isabella interrupted. "It's fraud. My team found the offshore accounts in the Caymans, Richard. The ones where you were funneling Apex's construction loans to build your own private villas." "That's embezzlement," Jessica gasped. "Dad? Is that true?" "And you, Jessica," Isabella continued, shifting her gaze to the mistress. "You claim to have a law degree from Harvard on your bio. Strange. My HR team called Harvard this morning. They have no record of you. You're a fraud, just like your father." Jessica shrank back, her face burning red. "And finally, Apex Solutions." Isabella looked at Mr. Henderson and Ethan. "I've been buying your stock for the last 48 hours. Through various shell companies, Helios now owns 51% of Apex Solutions. It was a hostile takeover, initiated this morning at 9 a.m. Ethan's jaw dropped. You own my company?" "I do," Isabella said. "Which means I am your boss." She picked up a single sheet of paper from the file. "And as the majority shareholder, my first act of business is restructuring," Isabella announced. "Mr. Henderson, you are fired for gross negligence. Your severance package is 0. Henderson slumped in his chair, defeated. "And Ethan," Isabella said, her eyes boring into his. "You're fired too, for incompetence, and for trying to leverage a personal relationship which no longer exists to secure a deal you weren't qualified for." "You can't do this!" Ethan screamed, slamming his fist on the table. "I built the sales division. I am Apex." "You are nothing," Isabella's voice rose, cracking like a whip. "You are a man who threw away a loyal wife for a title. Well, now you have neither." She pressed a button on the intercom. "Security, please escort the former employees of Apex Solutions out of the building." The doors opened, and 4 burly security guards marched in. "Wait! Bella! Please!" Ethan begged, tears welling in his eyes as a guard grabbed his arm. "I love you. I'm sorry. Jessica meant nothing. She was just a fling," Jessica shrieked. "You liar! You told me you loved me." She slapped Ethan across the face, the sound echoing in the silent boardroom. "Get them out," Isabella said, turning her chair back to the window. She didn't watch them leave. She just listened to the sounds of Ethan begging and Jessica screaming as they were dragged down the hallway. When the doors finally closed, the room was quiet again. Arthur cleared his throat. "That was effective, Madam President." "It's not over, Arthur," Isabella said, staring at the city. "Ethan still has his family name. He still has his mother. And Catherine needs to know that her power couple dream just turned into a nightmare." She turned around, her eyes cold. "Prepare the car. We're going to the Sterling estate. I have one last eviction notice to serve." The late afternoon sun bathed the Sterling estate in a deceptive golden glow, masking the rot that had taken hold of its foundation. Inside the sprawling Georgian mansion, Catherine Sterling was pacing the length of her Persian rugged parlour, a phone pressed to her ear and a glass of vintage Chardonnay in her free hand. "No, you aren't listening to me," Catherine snapped, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "I said I want the orchids to be white, pure white. We are scrubbing the slate clean. My son is about to announce a merger that will make us the most powerful family in the state, and I will not have pink carnations looking like a discount wedding at a strip mall. Fix it." She ended the call aggressively, tossing her phone onto the velvet settee. She took a long sip of wine, a smug smile playing on her lips. Today was the day. Ethan was at Helios International signing the deal. Isabella, that leech of a woman, was finally out of the picture. Catherine had already instructed the maids to pack Isabella's belongings, mostly cheap paperbacks and off-brand lotions, into black garbage bags and leave them by the service entrance. "Maria!" Catherine shouted toward the kitchen. "Make sure the driveway is swept. Ethan will be bringing guests. I want everything perfect." But it wasn't Ethan's Aston Martin that appeared at the iron gates a moment later. Catherine walked to the bay window, her brow furrowing, as a heavy black SUV with tinted windows forced the electronic gates open. It was followed by a second SUV, and finally, a sleek, two-tone Rolls-Royce Phantom that glided over the gravel like a shark cutting through water. "Who on earth is this?" Catherine muttered, indignation rising in her chest. She smoothed her skirt and marched to the front door, throwing it open before the vehicles had even come to a full stop. The convoy halted in a precise formation. The doors of the SUVs flew open in unison, and 6 men stepped out. They weren't the usual delivery men or contractors. These men wore tailored tactical suits and earpieces. They moved with a synchronized efficiency that made Catherine's stomach turn. Then, the rear door of the Rolls-Royce opened. A driver in white gloves held it steady as a woman stepped out. Catherine squinted against the sun. The woman was wearing a blindingly white pantsuit that looked like it had been sculpted from marble. She wore oversized sunglasses and heels that clicked with authority against the pavement. It took Catherine a full 10 seconds to recognize the posture. "Isabella?" Catherine gasped, the name tasting like bile. Isabella removed her sunglasses slowly, revealing eyes that held no warmth, no fear, and absolutely no mercy. She didn't look like the woman who used to timidly ask if she could use the washing machine. She looked like a conqueror surveying a captured city. "Hello, Catherine," Isabella said. Her voice was calm, carried by the wind across the manicured lawn. Catherine's shock quickly morphed into rage. She descended the stone steps, her finger pointed accusingly. "You have some nerve coming back here, and in a rented car, no less. Who are these people? Did you bring a moving crew for your trash bags? I told the maid to leave them by the dumpster." Isabella ignored the insult, signaling to Sebastian, who stood silently by her side holding a leather portfolio. "I'm not here for my things, Catherine," Isabella said, walking past the older woman and stepping onto the porch of the house she had been kicked out of only 24 hours ago. "I'm here to inspect my asset." "Your asset?" Catherine laughed, a high-pitched, incredulous sound. "You delusional girl. The divorce papers are signed. You get the Queen's apartment and a pittance. This estate belongs to the Sterling Trust. It has been in my family since 1950. You have no claim here. Now leave before I call the police and have you dragged off my property for trespassing." Isabella stopped at the threshold. She turned slowly, looking down at Catherine from the top step. The power dynamic had physically shifted. "Sebastian," Isabella said softly. "Show her." Sebastian stepped forward and produced a document, holding it out for Catherine to see. It wasn't a divorce settlement. It was a foreclosure notice, stamped with the seal of the New York State Supreme Court and the logo of a private holding company, Helios Distressed Assets, LLC. "What is this?" Catherine snatched the paper, her eyes scanning the legal jargon. "It's a notice of immediate repossession," Isabella explained, her voice devoid of pity. "You see, Catherine, your son has expensive tastes. He likes to project the image of a billionaire, but his salary at Apex didn't quite cover the private jets, the 5-star hotels, and the high-stakes poker games in Macau." Catherine froze. "Poker? Ethan doesn't... He plays bridge." "He plays no-limit hold'em," Isabella corrected. And he's terrible at it. Last year, he racked up $4 million in debt. To cover it, he took out a high-interest secondary mortgage on this estate. He leveraged the deed. "That's impossible," Catherine shrieked, the paper trembling in her hand. "The deed is in my name. He couldn't leverage it without my signature." Isabella tilted her head slightly. "Look at page 3, Catherine." Catherine flipped the page. There, at the bottom, was a signature. Catherine Elizabeth Sterling. "He forged it," Isabella said simply. "He committed bank fraud. He thought the merger with Helios would bring in a bonus large enough to pay off the loan before you ever found out. It was a gamble. And like all his other gambles, he lost." Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. She leaned against the doorframe for support. "No, Ethan wouldn't." "He did," Isabella continued. "The bank was preparing to seize the house next Tuesday. But I didn't want strangers living in my husband's childhood home. So I bought the debt this morning. I own the note, Catherine. I own the mortgage. And since the payments are 6 months behind, I am exercising my right to immediate foreclosure." Isabella checked her diamond watch. "You have 45 minutes to vacate. My team is here to inventory the fixtures to ensure nothing of value, meaning my value, is removed." "You can't do this," Catherine screamed, throwing the papers at Isabella. They fluttered harmlessly to the ground. "I am a pillar of this community. You are a nobody, a waitress Ethan picked up in a coffee shop." "I am the chairwoman of the board," Isabella corrected coldly. "And you are trespassing." She nodded to the security team. "Begin the sweep. Start with the art in the gallery. The Matisse is mine now." "Don't you touch that." Catherine lunged at a guard who was moving toward the door, but she was gently yet firmly blocked by Sebastian. "Mrs. Sterling, I advise you to step back," Sebastian said, his British accent clipped and professional. "We have the local sheriff on speed dial. Do not make this harder than it needs to be." Catherine watched in horror as the men streamed into her sanctuary. She heard the heavy boots on her hardwood floors. She heard the sound of paintings being lifted from walls. Her legacy was being dismantled piece by piece. "Why?" Catherine sobbed, turning back to Isabella. "Why are you doing this? I took you in." "You took me in as a servant," Isabella replied, stepping closer, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Do you remember my birthday last year? You told me not to cut the cake because it was for guests only. Do you remember when my father died? And you told me to stop crying because it was ruining the mood of your dinner party? You didn't take me in, Catherine. You tolerated me because you thought I was weak. You thought I was safe." Isabella leaned in. "You should have feared the quiet ones." Just then, the sound of a revving engine tore through the air. A silver Aston Martin careened through the open gates, fishtailing on the gravel before screeching to a halt behind the Rolls-Royce. Smoke rose from the tires. The driver's door flew open and Ethan stumbled out. He looked like a man who had gone 12 rounds with a prizefighter. His bespoke Italian suit was rumpled and stained with sweat. His tie was missing. His cheek was bright red, swelling from the slap Jessica had delivered in the boardroom. "Mum!" Ethan yelled, his voice cracking with panic. He ran toward the porch, stumbling over his own feet. "Mum, stop them! Don't let them in!" He froze when he saw Isabella standing on the top step, looking down at him like a deity of vengeance. "Ethan!" Catherine ran to him, grabbing the lapels of his jacket. She shook him violently. "Is it true? Did you sign the house away? Did you forge my name?" Ethan looked at his mother's terrified face, then at the security guards, hauling a bust of Julius Caesar out the front door. He collapsed to his knees on the driveway, the gravel digging into his expensive slacks. "I had to," Ethan wept, burying his face in his hands. "I was in the hole, Mum. The sharks. They were going to break my legs. I thought the Helios deal was a sure thing. I thought I could pay it back today." "You idiot!" Catherine screamed, slapping him across the head. "You foolish, arrogant boy. You destroyed us." "I didn't know." Ethan looked up at Isabella, tears streaming down his face. "Bella, please. I didn't know it was you. If I knew you were the CEO, I never would have—" "You never would have what?" Isabella interrupted, her voice cutting through his sobbing. "You never would have treated me like garbage. You never would have cheated on me. You never would have divorced me." She walked down the steps slowly, stopping just inches from him. "That's the problem, Ethan. You only treat people with respect when you think they have power. You didn't love me when I was Isabella the housewife. You only want me now because I'm Isabella the billionaire." "I can change," Ethan begged, reaching for her hand, but stopping short when Sebastian stepped between them. "Bella, I'm your husband. We have history. You can't just leave me homeless. I have no job. I have no money." Jessica left me at the office. She took the car keys. I had to hotwire my own car just to get here. "Look at me." "I am looking at you," Isabella said, "and I see a bad investment." She signaled to the lead security guard. "Change the locks and tow the Aston Martin. It was purchased with company funds from Apex Solutions. Since I own Apex, I own the car. It's company property." "No!" Ethan scrambled backward. "That's my car. It's all I have left." "You have your mother," Isabella said, gesturing to the sobbing woman on the porch. "And you have your freedom. I suggest you use it to find a job. I hear the coffee shop where we met is hiring. They pay minimum wage." Isabella turned her back on them. She walked to the Rolls-Royce, the door opening automatically for her. "Wait!" Catherine shouted, stumbling down the stairs, her dignity completely gone. "Isabella, please. The house. Where will we go? It's getting dark." Isabella paused with one foot inside the car. She looked back over her shoulder, her silhouette framed by the setting sun. "I believe there is a Motel 6 on the highway," Isabella said thoughtfully. "It's affordable. You might even be able to get a room with a kitchenette. It'll be a good place for you to practice cooking your own meals." She slid into the leather seat. "Drive, Sebastian." As the heavy door thudded shut, sealing her in the quiet luxury of her success, Isabella didn't look back at the rearview mirror. She didn't need to see Ethan pounding his fists on the gravel or Catherine wailing at the sky. She opened her laptop and typed a quick email to her real estate team. Subject: Sterling Estate. Message: bulldoze it. Turn the land into a community garden for the orphanage. Let something good finally grow there. The Rolls-Royce glided out of the gates, leaving the Sterling dynasty in the dust, exactly where they belonged. And that is the story of how Isabella, the useless housewife, served the ultimate plate of cold revenge. Ethan and Catherine thought value was determined by the price of a suit or a last name. They learned the hard way that the quietest person in the room is often the one holding all the cards. What did you think of Isabella's Protocol Omega? Was taking the house too far, or was it exactly what they deserved? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of hidden identities and billionaire justice, please destroy that like button, just like Isabella destroyed Apex Solutions. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. We have a new drama dropping next week about a rude flight attendant who didn't realize her passenger owned the airline. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind, because you never know who you're really talking to.